All right, well, welcome back. This is going to be interactive session 4. I know I got emails from a couple of people saying they weren't going to be able to make it, which is no problem. I will do what I did before. I'm going to go through everything, watch the videos, talk about what we would have talked about, what you would have talked about, and we'll kind of go from there. I will also say that, excuse me, tomorrow, it'll probably be in the afternoon after court. I will send out the pre-work link for the next week. All right. We are going to get started right away. One of the things we talked about this week was substance abuse was a major topic of discussion. And we wanted to make sure that we really dive into this a little bit more. And I have a video coming up, but in answer to the question that came out, adults are much more likely to have issues with substance abuse than children. And we don't know why. We can always guess it has to do with the fact that they've had more trauma, more stress, more money, more access, things like that. But adults do tend to have more issues with substance abuse than children. Okay, so I want you to pay attention to this next video, as long as everything works fine technology-wise. And then afterwards, we're going to talk about a couple of things. We would be normally having a bigger discussion, but obviously I can't really discuss everything with myself. I would look even more foolish than I probably already do. All right, we're going to go ahead and get started. All right, well, we'll do it this way. There we go.
Good Sunday evening. Thank you for joining us. I'm Mary Beth Dixon. Tonight, a very special report from Color 8's Greg Lamont, saving kids, children of addicts.
In 2014, 400,000 children in this country were reported to be living in foster homes. According to the U.S. Justice Department, as much as 80% of them came from alcohol and drug-addicted homes. Can you imagine? 80%? The story we never seem to hear is the impact that drug addiction has on the children, from the children, when they're children. Tonight, a local success story, a family ripped apart by drugs and the effort being made to bring them back together.
Jason Ramirez is 12 years old. Friends and family call him J2 because his father's name is also Jason. And this very precocious girl is Jason's 11-year-old sister, Zaya. Zaya says boys are icky. J2 says he's already had a couple of girlfriends. Ah, the wishful thinking of young boys. J2 says he's been skateboarding for 4 years, and you know what? He's got the scrapes on his legs to prove it. Zaya likes to show off her gymnastic skills, and she is really good. She's smart, too. Says she makes mostly A's. J2 says he's doing okay in school. Folks, that's pure boy code for I'm not making A's. These are kids who proudly display their excellent artistic skills. Clearly, these two love and trust each other. They love their mom and sure seem to be enjoying life, don't they? Hard to imagine when you consider just 2 years ago, life for these two youngsters was a living hell.
There was this long period of time where I was scared of, everything.
They never hurt me, but they hurt each other. They never hurt me.
What did you think about when they hurt each other?
I thought it was scary. Because my dad's humongous and my mom's tiny. So she couldn't really do anything, and I thought it was super scary. Because sometimes she would run into our room and hide herself. But it would freak me out, and me and my brother would start crying because it scared us.
Yeah, a lot of fighting happened in that house. My dad always hit my mom, and yeah. My oldest sister was really scared, but it didn't really affect me because I thought that was normal.
And then there were the drugs. J2 and Zaya's mom, Alicia, was addicted to pills, booze, and methamphetamine. And the impact her addiction had on her children was dark and very disturbing.
Well, it depended on if I had enough drugs or not. If I didn't, it was miserable. I was always screaming and yelling and you know, making the kids do everything. I mean, it really depended on what I was using at the time. Like, if it was meth, I mean, I was numb to everything. Like, I didn't care what they did. I didn't care if they were eating or, you know, what they were playing with or anything. You know, I would be, like, stuck on my phone or, you know, just stupid things. And if I was on pills, I would be, like, cleaning and, you know, I got a lot of stuff done, you know, but being not able to have pills, if I didn't have them, it was the worst sickness ever, you know, and then I would just get mean and ugly towards them.
She was there with us, but she wasn't. It's like she's there with us, sitting next to us, but she's not in our head. She's not with us in our heart.
In 2013, Alicia and her children were living with Alicia's mother and grandmother. That's where her drug use came to the attention of authorities. She had another child who tested positive for meth and pills. In order to keep her children, she was told she'd have to live in a second chance sober living home. She went to the Center for Children and Families, but she just couldn't stop using.
Me and my little sister were coloring, and like my older sister, she looked outside and my mom was crying, and then she came back inside, and then the caseworker said that we had to leave for a while and go with someone we didn't know. Yeah, it was pretty sad.
Her addiction led her children to being placed in foster homes as many as 3 times. Just 9 and 10 years old, suddenly ripped from their mama, taken to a strange home, not knowing how long they'd be there, wondering whether they'd ever see their mom again, and now living with people they had never before seen.
About 30 minutes to get me into the car, 45 minutes, because I didn't want to leave.
It was scary. Like, you just didn't want to be there. You think like you're gonna stay there for one day, and then you end up staying for like a year. It's not fun.
I had to cry myself to sleep. I didn't like it. I was scared because I'm like, I don't know her. What if she does something bad? And I kind of let it. But then after a while, you get to know her, and they're actually pretty cool people. But it just feels weird without your mom because you hardly get to see her. And most kids are like, kind of say that their life's tough when they kind of have everything in place and they have a mom, they have a dad, when most kids don't even have their mom or their dad or nobody with them. So I think that it was pretty hard for me and my brother.
Alicia says she would stop using, at least long enough to regain custody of her children, promise the kids she would never use again, and then soon after, go right back at it.
Angry at mom?
Very angry and then sad and upset because we wanted to be a family.
Well, when I was like 10, I didn't really even know what was going on. I was just mad at her for using drugs and not hanging out with us or talking to us.
I had no idea where I was going because I kept moving back and forth. But my brother only went to 2 foster homes. I went to 3.
The first time I had to tell them, you know, you're going to foster care, you know. And when I think about when I left them, when I took them all to do school and daycares and I just didn't come back and pick them up, you know, that, I'm stuck with that for the rest of my life, you know, that decision I made. And every time I think about it, I mean, it hurts, you know, it doesn't really go away.
Clearly, Alicia was speeding down a path toward losing her kids forever and, quite possibly, her own life. But a strange and rather ironic twist of fate occurred in the blink of an eye. A drug and alcohol-induced near-fatal traffic accident changed everything.
Yeah, like I had gotten a bad wreck, a really bad wreck, and like almost died. And after that is when I have not used since and thought about it so much differently, you know? So it kind of scared me straight.
Working with Dr. Brenda Roche at the Center for Children and Families, Alicia and her children began taking steps toward a life none ever knew existed. Keep in mind, Alicia started partying when she was a young teenager and even did drugs with her own mom. The road back would not be easy. Roche says when the therapy began, the children were filled with fear, a fear that translated into deep anger.
They're angry at the department, so they're angry at CPS for taking them away from their parents. They're angry at us often in the beginning because we're asking them to talk about things they don't want to talk about and that they're afraid to talk about. They're angry at their mom and dad. They're angry at the world, and oftentimes they're angry at God.
Bottom line, the children were completely traumatized.
Many of our kids are functioning from post-traumatic stress disorder, yes. And a lot of times it's due to the witnessing of domestic violence, and then we add another layer on it of when they're having to be separated from their parent. And so now they have chronic post-traumatic stress disorder with multiple different situations.
Do you feel like you've damaged your children?
I do. But I feel like what I'm doing now is just fixing it, you know? I mean, what else can I do besides, you know, trying to make it better?
Here at the Center for Children and Families, the therapists work with the entire family to provide counseling and parenting skills, among a host of other services. But the primary focus is always on the children.
Every decision we make is filtered through the question, what's in the best interest of the child? So that in case parents can't be successful in parenting, that the children would be better prepared to live successfully in a foster placement, and we hope an adoptive placement or maybe a kin placement. But all the while investing in them ensures that whatever that outcome for the adults in their lives, these kids have the skills that they need to be successful in their own life, and hoping that in those families that have had generations of trauma, generations of substance abuse, incarceration, mental health issues, whatever that might be for them, that we would be able to break that cycle with that child or those children so that they can go on and have then healthy, successful children.
Being with Mom before was like, you didn't get any attention, but now she tries to care for all of her kids and at one time, and it's way better than before.
It's crazy that it's actually happened, you know? Like, I never thought in a million years I could feel like this good about being sober.
And you don't even have to ask the kids. Their faces pretty much tell the story of their own happiness. But it is a cautious happiness. It has to be when it comes to addiction.
The next time she uses, we don't ever get to live with her again. That's what the people say.
So you live with that fear?
Pretty much.
Some great news to report. Alicia is zeroing in on 2 years of sobriety. Way to go, Alicia. The moral to this story, ladies and gentlemen, is quite clear. If you or someone you know is living in a drug-addicted home, get help before it's too late for you, but more importantly, for the innocent children. Thanks for watching and have a great night.
All right, so very poignant. We would normally have some discussion. There are always a few things that I want to pull out of here in the discussion. They usually come out anyway. One of them is Zaya's quote, they hurt each other, but they didn't hurt me, which was very brave, but also a big lie, even if she's still lying to herself, because then she immediately goes to talk about how scared she was and how she used to run with her brother and take cover. And I guess that she's thinking they didn't hit her, but she was hurt by them. Another quote, it was scary, but it didn't affect me. I thought it was normal. You know, when her brother says that, it wasn't normal. And he really, he grew up thinking that kind of situation was normal. Those are some things that always impact. I thought I would be gone for a day, and then I was gone for a year. something we need to consider when we're chatting with the children is that we need to remember not to promise that they're going to go home right away. Not to promise that at the next hearing, everything will be better. Because they plan in their heads for a day or something immediate. And we all know that the court system does not move at that kind of a pace. So it's really important that you are clear. The other thing that I want to point out here is we had a well-meaning people, is how he describes it. However, the quote that he gives is, the next time she uses, we don't ever get to live with her again. So then the reporter says, so you live with that fear? And the child answers, very much. That is just going to cause more chronic complex trauma. So let me explain why. First of all, they get the sword of Damocles hanging over them. If mom makes one mistake, one relapse, anything happens, they know they're gone. Now, mom's doing really, really well in this video, and we see that, and that's great because this is real life taken from a channel, you know, a true news station. And we want her to be successful. However, excuse me, end of the day. However, we've all been 5 minutes late before at one point or another. But when their mom is 5 minutes late, what are they thinking? They're immediately going back to the trauma. They're immediately going back to that moment. Oh my goodness, is mom using? Is there a problem? Am I going to get to go home? Am I not going to get to go home? Every time a normal real life situation happens, that trauma is going to be brought to the forefront, and that is going to happen over and over and over again, which we know is chronic. And it's actually complex trauma because it reminds them of the first trauma. And then they have that fear and with everything else. So again, how we share things is really important. And I know that the person who said that, or that he heard that from, was probably really, really well-meaning, probably not thinking it was going to be successful reintegration. And they thought that, you know, at least the kids will be aware that it's a possibility, but sometimes even that can be traumatizing to the children. So we need to be really, really aware. Okay, there's usually quite a bit of discussion here. And then the next thing we would go into is Shannon's story. And here, this is a situation where the child was removed from the mom when the child was 1. The little girl Shannon was placed in foster care with Nathan and Marie for 16 months. So now we're at 28 months old. Katerina successfully completed I don't like that National CASA calls it de-addiction treatment for alcohol, but she went through rehabilitation for alcohol. The foster parents supported mom, helped mom furnish an apartment and facilitate church visits. Okay, Shannon, the little girl, was returned to her mom when she was 28 months old, so just over 2. A little more than a year later, the mom relapsed with alcohol and was transported to the emergency room. Now, as you read in that initial case plan for this one, or what we would read, is that mom actually called the foster parents to come take care of the child before she called 911 to help get her to the hospital. And then mom went back into another rehabilitation treatment and inpatient treatment. Now, before I get to what the question is and what the discussion would be centered on, there's a couple of things that I want to talk about this. First of all, relapse is a part of recovery, especially with alcohol. And so we need to be aware of that things are going to happen. That's why we have the safety plan. And I do want to give the mom in this situation, in this case study, kudos for this fact that she did reach out to the foster parents. And it would be a normal course of action if the child was removed from the home, that they would give the previous foster family first option to take the child in again. And that works to the child's benefit. First of all, the child's already been there. is familiar, knows the rules, whether it's this case or other cases. And that is one of the things that our system does do fairly well, is to try and make it less traumatic, but if they can get them back in the same foster home they were in previously. So this is where normally people are going to break out into small groups. I'm going to assign one group. The argument, they have to be able to bring some recommendations and arguments why the child should be returned to the mom again. And then the other group is going to have a discussion centered around why mom's rights should potentially be terminated. And then, you know, that would leave it open for the foster parents to potentially adopt. And going back and forth. And I always say that when we went to directors training to learn this new curriculum, we actually had to do that exercise, and they randomly split us. And the thing is I was in a group that had to argue termination of parental rights. And we're all kind of like, wow, you could really argue this case. We don't have all the information. I wouldn't be comfortable making this in court. And we had to set that aside and really make the argument to practice. And we still have one person in our group that was like, I absolutely can't ever, you know, and basically didn't follow the instructions. So I know, so we let her go to the other side, to the other group, and then we had to discuss it. And I will tell you, I know it's really challenging here. And it's one of the things that when we come back together, I would have the two groups talk about it and very much have a big discussion. And then kind of overall as a group, what's our consensus? What do we think? So that's what would happen here. A lot of discussion this week, as you can tell. We're going to be lots and lots of discussion. That's what we're really focused on more than anything this week. Okay. I do want to move into stereotypes really quickly. And one of the things that I was going to have everybody do is remind everybody stereotypes are rigid and inflexible. They're held even when there's evidence and proof to the contrary. And they can be positive or negative. And then I was going to have everybody give a different stereotype. And so typically you'll have, you know, the common stereotypes. And then one of the ones that I always say is that very few people pick is that Asian people are really good at math. And that's a stereotype. Although it's a positive stereotype, it's still a stereotype. And you shouldn't anticipate that just because you see someone that's Asian that they're really good at math, because they might not be. We all are individuals. We all have our strengths and weaknesses. And so this would be another discussion where we would kind of to break down those stereotypes and help us understand kind of what some of our biases are. As I said, lots and lots of discussion. So the Lavender Bass case, this is one where I had you read just a really brief, I think it was almost like maybe a 1.5 page case study. And then I was going to go through and we would review some of the key points. And then we would really dig in. And who would we talk to first and find out what we would learn there, and who would we talk to next? And there's a lot of complications to the case. I will say, since we are not having anybody here doing this discussion, feel free to read the handout that I said don't read until the interactive session and kind of go through. It is always interesting, the order, because when we don't follow the order on there, feel free to just go through and say, who would I talk to? Okay, now who would I talk to next? And then just read those and kind of skip around versus the order that they gave. And then be thinking about recommendations, or what do you think is wrong? And what, you know, what we love to do is start with recommendations and then together as a group. And then we really get through and we start visiting people and we see how, if and how those recommendations would change. We spent probably 45 minutes to an hour on this case. It's a very big case, very detailed. We get to talk about cultural things. We get to talk about biases. And one of the recommendations that we've only had happen once in our training sessions is people ask about placement getting some cultural training. And yes, you can make a recommendation that you can make recommendations for placement as well, especially if placement, you say CASA Advocate recommends that placement complete some, I don't want to give away the story, but like complete some cultural training to better help trying not to give it away, but typically, so that is a big, huge case study that we really dig in on. We work through concerns with this one. We work through updates. We work through recommendations and the bases and everything underneath, which is why it takes so long. So that's one of the things that we would be doing. Okay, and then we would have read certain things. This may give away some of it, but not everything. Writing effective court reports. We want to word things appropriately. And this is where I'm also going to remind you is when we're going, there might be a way to reword something that is more appropriate. That is kind of our job as CASA staff to help you with that. And then also, this is where I remind you again, this is where you collect up all your court notes while you're writing your court reports and how you turn what you see here into court reports. But really going to focus now, since you all know this, I'm not going to reteach that section, saying things appropriately. So I always tell people there are no pronouns and there are no opinions. Everything has to be fact-based. So therefore, what's wrong with this sentence? And then it would be, well, busted is slang and so is pot. And we don't want to use slang or jargon. So you could say, the father has been convicted for, but then put exactly what he was convicted for. The father is currently incarcerated for a drug-related offense. The father told the CASA advocate that the father has used marijuana, smoked marijuana in the past. These are all different ways you could say the same thing. It's how we word it. Let's see. Mr. Bass has never been a father to Lavender. So I would normally say, hey, what's wrong with this sentence? And then you all would tell me that, well, this is an opinion. That's right. It is an opinion. And so we'd have to state this objectively. Mr. Bass stated that Mr. Bass has not spent much time with Lavender. There you go. That's whether he was a father or not, he hasn't spent much time. That's a fact-based thing. Okay. Admittedly, he has a history of using inhalants. Obviously, we want to be very specific to avoid implied or continued or current use of inhalants. We would say Mr. Bass admitted to using inhalants in the past. We don't want to make people think with admittedly that he's continuing to use them. Mr. Bass claims. We don't want to use words in our court reports that imply an alternate meaning, because especially claims. Well, he claims that, you know, he's been clean for 6 months versus Mr. Bass states that he has been clean 6 months, you know, because he's been in county lockup. So want to make sure that we're not using a word that has multiple meanings. Okay. Lavender seems to not be very engaged. This is not one that we would like. This is very opinionated. And also, I don't know what you mean. So this is where I would say describe. Lavender does not typically look you in the eye when she's speaking to you. Lavender does not answer questions or speak a lot, even in conversation. Sometimes ignores the foster mother and doesn't listen when she is talking. Okay, this is the pronouns. Lavender sometimes ignores the foster mother and doesn't listen to her when she is talking. Okay, I think I know that you mean that Lavender doesn't listen to the foster mother, but it could mean, because we use pronouns, the foster mother doesn't listen to Lavender when Lavender is talking. See, so this is why we always want to make sure no pronouns. They can become very confusing. Foster mother states she has to call her. Again, pronouns. I don't know who or what? And this is a question that, is there a hearing issue, that sort of thing. This is not the best foster placement for Lavender. That is a complete and utter opinion. And so we would dissect these, we would come up with other ones, but this is kind of what we would do to really using words well. All right. So there's a couple of things. We're going to watch this video, and then there are actually a couple things that we're going to talk about it. Just be prepared. I am going to, this is our Harris Price case. This case would have been, it'll say the number of days into the case up there. I want to say this is the 180 days. But I will again stop it at certain points, and then we will have a few things to discuss. Oh, day 300, excuse me.
Kathy, I'm so glad to see you at this hearing. How are you doing?
I'm good.
Oh,
Everything's
are you
good.
really?
Mom,
You are
yeah.
good?
Mom.
Hey,
Hey. Oh,
Oh, I miss you so much.
I miss you too. So am I gonna get to come live with you again? Me and Robert? And Baby Rose, like old times?
Baby, you're gonna be living with Carol for a little while because I gotta take care of some things, okay? I don't expect you to understand, and I didn't want you to find out this way, but...
I just want to live with you, that's all I want.
I know, but I'm not even gonna be able to take care of you for a little while, and you have to understand me. This is just one last thing.
So you don't want me anymore? Is that what it is?
That is not true. That is not... Ben!
Anger in this situation is a really common response by the children, especially younger children who can't express their emotions otherwise. But in addition, they're feeling rejected. They've been just waiting and waiting and waiting and not always understanding what else is going on, because it's not appropriate to say, hey, mom hasn't gone to rehab. Mom still has an alcohol issue. Mom isn't doing her case plan tasks, as in the case of the Harris Price. So the child is just waiting for their parents, thinking their parents are doing all this. The parents want them, and then they get really angry when they're confronted with that may not be the case.
Good morning, everyone. The court will call cause number 67432 in the interest of the Harrison Price children here in the 499th Judicial District Court of the San Gabriel County, Texas. We do have present with us here today representing the department, Mr. Britton, our county attorney. Our caseworker, Ms. Greenberg, is back with us with her supervisor, Ms. Dossett. We're happy to have Ms. Jackson and her supervisor, Ms. Ott, back from the CASA program. Ms. Duke is here in her representation of the children, and we're very happy to have Ben with us again here today. The mother, Ms. Price, and Ms. Langsley, her attorney, are present with us. Ms. Hill is with us again today as well. At this time then, ladies and gentlemen, would you please raise your right hands and to be sworn at this time?
Again, we don't all swear in like this. Typically, only if they're offering testimony. A lot of times, even when parents are giving updates, they won't. If they suspect that the parent is lying or about to lie, a lot of times they will have the parent swear in, because then it's a criminal situation, and they're not trying. A lot of times that convinces the parents to be honest, even if it's not flattering information to them, versus to lie. And so it actually typically is not to catch the parents in a lie or compound to their case, but more to give them the opportunity to recognize, no, I better tell the truth. So other places, they have everybody swear in all at once, but we don't typically have that happen.
Each of you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony that you give before this court today will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God.
I do.
We are here today for our second permanency hearing in this particular case. Ms. Price, the state of Texas gives us 1 year only to resolve the matters that are before this court today. If those matters have not been resolved at the end of that 1 year period, your parental rights are subject to being restricted or terminated. Do you understand that warning that I've given to you?
Yes.
The end of that 1 year period is November 31st of this year. We are here for our second permanency hearing, and at this time we are going to hear from our caseworker, as to how things have been proceeding in the case. So, Ms. Greenberg, what is it that you have to report to us at this time?
Your Honor, Rose has made some progress, but she continues to have significant delays. Her foster parents, though, report that she's very needy, but they are continuing to engage in ECI services and therapy for Rose. They are very bonded with her and attached with her and would like to see her remain in their home. Rose's biological mother, Ms. Price, who's with us today, has not visited with Rose since the status hearing, and neither has Ben or Robert.
All right, is Rose on any medications at this time?
Not at this time, Your Honor.
All right, and speaking of medications, that reminds me of an issue that we discussed previously in another hearing. Ms. Jackson, we had talked about medications for Ben. Would you like to go ahead and address that issue at this time?
Yes, Your Honor. Ben is still on the full dosage that he was originally placed on, and I have grave concerns about that. I think the therapy and maybe the family therapy that you had talked about would be something that we need to do, and we need to readdress assessing those drugs.
All right. Thank you. So it seems to me the most appropriate way for us to address that would really to be have a specific discussion about that at another time, and so we'll address that. The other thing I wanted to highlight from your report was Ben's court report, and do you want to discuss what happened there and where that is?
Okay, sorry, had to change the angle. I'm battling the sun here. We do have a brand new court report from the children. It is fairly extensive. They can fill out part or all of it. But even letters to court or the child being in court and being willing to share their perspective or something that they want or frustrated by or whatnot is highly, highly, highly encouraged. And it is completely acceptable for you to help facilitate that. And what I mean when I say that is encourage them to write the letter or whatnot. If the letter is given to you, you need to make sure you give it to the guardian ad litem. Only the guardian ad litem in Kansas is allowed to submit that court report on the child's behalf. So even if they give it to us in the past, we used to be able to include it, but now any official court report coming from them absolutely has to be from the guardian ad litem.
Well, I think Ben became very upset. He did have a court report for you, but I think he's thrown it away.
All right. Why don't we go ahead and talk and hear from you then, Ms. Hill, as to how things are going in the placement and how Ben's doing over there at your home.
I think things in general are going okay. We've had a bit of a problem with attitude lately, and what hasn't helped is that during Kathy's visitations, I feel that I'm undermined, my authority is undermined, and that doesn't help the situation. And the experiences have not been good. I think she may have been using alcohol, drinking before coming. I'm saying this because I'm trying to be honest here and say what's going on. And because I do want what's best for Ben. Another problem we've had recently is Ben has stolen some money out of my purse a few times, and hasn't been a lot, but I feel like it's worth mentioning, and I'm hoping that that doesn't get worse.
So it's kind of putting you in the middle between Ben and his mom, having to supervise the visits.
Yes.
All right, so that's something we'll address here in a little bit when we get to our orders. But let's go ahead and discuss what orders we can address at this particular time. Since we are at our second permanency hearing, mediation would be appropriate in this case, as we order in each one of our cases at this particular hearing. So the court will...
Okay, that is a Texas thing. We don't have mediation at this point or at any point ordered by the court. So keep in mind, that's a Texas, not a Kansas thing.
Enter an order ordering the case to go to mediation prior to our final hearing, which is our next hearing. Mediation is a process by which all the parties get together outside of the courtroom and sit down and attempt to work out an agreement for final orders without having to have someone make the decision for them. So we're going to ask that you participate in that process, Ms. Price. You can discuss exactly what that means with your attorney, and Ms. Langsley can explain that to you.
Judge, can you add to the orders that if she is an inpatient, that she be released to attend mediation?
Right, so we'll definitely put within the court's order for mediation a requirement that she be released from the facility without harming her chance of going back for that. Thank you for bringing that to my attention. All right, very good. So we've discussed that. Also, please be familiar that our next setting is our final merits setting, and that, of course, we do have our typical discovery control plan in place. Please refer to that before we come back to court. Now, we know that
We don't have one of those in Kansas either.
we had a 6-month monitored return of the child, Robert, to his father, and we have closed that portion of our case by the orders that we have previously entered, and we will address those then again outside of court. So that portion of our case then can be closed at this time. I think under the circumstances, we need to make an extra effort that we can follow up with visitations then between the mother and Ben. But I think under the circumstances, it's not going to be able to be occurring at the aunt's home based on what we've discussed previously. And I talked to Ben before about family counseling and the counseling that he's participating in. So maybe there's a way for you, Ms. Greenberg, through the department to arrange those visitations around the counseling.
Absolutely, yeah.
All right, so those will be the orders of the court here today. We'll recess here in just a bit, but before we do, I want to speak to you just one more time, Ms. Price. This will be the last time I see you before we get to our final hearing. And of course, we've already ordered you to attend mediation, and you're going to discuss that with your attorney. We've had a lot of time go by in this particular case, and we know we're getting very close to the end of the case. And so your behavior from this point forward is very critical as to the determination as to whether you're going to have your children returned to your care or not. It's imperative that you go into inpatient as soon as possible. Do your best to do what you're supposed to before you get in there. When you're in inpatient, work very hard, and hopefully we'll have a good result at the end of this case. Stay in contact with your attorney, stay in contact with your caseworker, and when we come back to the final hearing then, hopefully we'll have a good outcome. Do you understand all those things I've explained to you?
Yes.
Very good. Now, here in just a second, we're going to go ahead and recess. At that time, then, Ben and his advocates and I will have another visit back in chambers. Unless there's anything further, ladies and gentlemen, we'll recess at this time. Thank you.
Okay, and then nothing, we don't get to see that second session in chambers. I did stop and talk to you about the child court reports. Sorry, I'm trying to battle this glare. I can't even find it. It's way too big. So there we go. That's a little bit better. So what I do want to talk to you about is what you see here are also 3 different children who get 3 different outcomes. Rose is looking like we don't know if she'll reintegrate or not. It's not looking like mom wants Ben back at this point in time. So that would be either kinship guardianship or something on that idea. Whereas Robert was reintegrated with his father. So we have a reintegration. We have another one that is in kinship, and we have, I don't know if Rose is going to be able to reintegrate with her mom or that she'll end up having to be adopted. So 3 different children, 3 different possible outcomes that we're looking at here. And so we would discuss how that happens and how that can happen in court with these cases, and how that has happened a few times where different children have different needs. So they have a different best interest. And a lot of it depends on age and so many other factors. And so that is always important. Now, the other thing that I wanted to talk about here is we don't typically see children in chambers, even with other people present. The judges pretty much prefer to talk to people, to the children in person in the courtroom on the record. Now, I have seen judges ask parents to leave the courtroom. The judge can't have that in private ex parte session with the child and then use any of that information in the case. So they have to be really careful. So what they'll do is they'll leave the professionals in the case, or they may even ask us and just have the attorneys present or the guardian ad litem present or someone else present so that there's no impropriety going on. But typically we don't put children in chambers for child needed care cases in Kansas. So then we would get into this case, we would dig it apart. We would say, like, you know, what would we do? What are we looking at? You know, you see mom is still potentially using. She's just, I mean, we are 10 months into this case and mom is still not gotten any help for her alcoholism issues and different things like that and what that means. So we would get into those discussion recommendations we would make, etc., for this case. That would be another discussion that we would have, but I can't have it with myself. All right. So then we would come here for any questions that you may have. And then I would wrap it up and I will send you out. And like I said, I will see you all next week for the next interactive session. But what I will say is tomorrow afternoon, after I get out of court, I will be sending you out the pre-work for week 5. I did get that all finished up today. All right. With that all being said, I will see you all later. I hope you have a wonderful week. And remember, if you have any questions, please do not hesitate to reach out.